Hi, this is Anna from BB3 AV channel and welcome to some of you who have been watching me for a while with regards to my craft, my cross stitch and a little bit of my knitting, and welcome to all of you who are completely new. This is going to be a slightly different video. I'm not going to talk anything about my craft. I'm going to talk about my main hobby, which is reading. And I've changed the location. I'm now in my library, so this is a small section of my library behind me. And I came prepared with my little reader's journal. It's a new one. I've only started it about 4 days ago, so I have some of my notes. Quite like it. I like Moleskine, and this is the special edition Little Prince with a fox. I love foxes. So I'm gonna start with what I have been reading, and since it's my first video, it's completely new. For those of you who are first time on my channel, I'm Russian, but I speak English because I live in England. So I'm pretty much bilingual. Even though I do have an accent, I do fully communicate in both languages. I probably communicate better in English than I do in Russian now, because all of my university education and my postgraduate education has been done in this country. So mostly think in English, but I've made a huge effort this year to read more in Russian language because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose the ability to communicate in a proper Russian language, not just a half Russian, half English mixture. I would like to be able to talk to my parents and my grandparents and fully express myself, and that's what's happening. If you are switching off from one language, you use the first word which pops into your mind for a thing, and very often it would be in English, or it will be completely random, because my husband is Russian. When we speak to each other, sometimes it comes up really weird, because it will be 90% in English and a couple of words will pop in Russian. So this year I made a genuine target to read more in Russian, so my reading is going to reflect it. If the book is written in Russian, I would read it obviously in Russian language. If the book is written in English, I would read it in English. If the book is written in any other language, I go about it two ways. I either try to find the best translation there is, so I'm going to look online for what the critics think. Sometimes there would be a translation from French to Russian or from French to English. But very often the translation will be done in Russian years before it will be done into English. People in Russia still read slightly more than they read in England. So for a lot of Asian literature, or for Eastern European, so we're talking about Hungarian literature, Bulgarian literature, Polish literature. Polish now is slightly different. It is being translated into English more and more, for example, by New York Press. But it might just be easier for me to read something in Russian, even though it was written in French, because a good example is Perfume by Zuskin, The History of One Murder of Perfumist. That has different subtitles. It's a German book. I have read it in Russian less than a year since it's been published in German, and it's taken 3 years for it to be translated into English. Some books I have read this year, they have never been translated into English, but they have been written in French, in a French classic, more than sort of the fantasy, science fiction genre. So I'm gonna stop rambling, stick to what I've read in the month of November. And in the month of November, I have read 14 books, but as you can see, some of them were like really short reads. And I only have 3 physical things. Everything else I've read was an electronic copy, either because it was in Russian and I wanted to see whether or not I like it before I purchased the copy, or it was young adult literature I've read in English. And to be honest, I never purchased them in a paperback because I read them once and that's about it. So I tend to read those on Scribble if I can get them for a subscription. I tend to read those through Kindle Unlimited again, so I can get them for free. So as far as my young adult, I've read by the same author. I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books by the same author, like in a 1 week, like a week and a half in one chunk, and I have paid 0 for them because I got all of them on Kindle Unlimited. So November started for me being ill. I wasn't feeling particularly well, so I wanted something where I could stop thinking completely. But then I got better, and towards the end of the month I got really ill to the point that I had to take a week off work. So again, I came back to the same author because it was like chewing gum. I don't have a TV, so I don't watch soap operas, but young adult romantic novels, that's in effect what it is for me. It's the same as for some people watching Jeremy Kyle or watching a soap opera on TV, because it is just so mindless. It's carbon characters for most of it. You know what to expect. You know it's gonna end well. Rarely there are going to be surprises. So it's a comfort read for me, and I can go through them really, really quickly. So the author I'm talking about is J. McLean. She's completely new, but the books came out 3 years ago, nearly 4 years ago, and it took me that long. What I was doing, I was browsing the recommended list on the Goodreads, and her latest book popped up in the new releases. So the book I came across was Lucas. It's the first book in the Preston Brothers series, and I'm going to try to insert the picture here. And I've read it like in one night. It was really, really easy, and thought like, fine. So he is a spin-off character from a previous series. So then I went to the rest of the series, and the other series was called More Than, and it had 5 books. It had More Than This, More Than Her, More Than Him, More Than Forever, and More Than Enough. And I've read, as I've mentioned, all of them in about 10 days. It's really, really quick read. And it was nice and easy, really brainless, always ends well for the characters involved. And I've given them between 2 and 4 stars, because when I do the Goodreads the judgments with a star between 1 and 5, I approach it from the point of view not of whether or not the book is amazing, in terms of, you can't compare. What did I just finish reading this month? Dr. Zhivago. You can't compare Dr. Zhivago to one of this. But for the genre they're in, you can still judge them from 1 to 5. So for the genre they're in, I judge them between 2 and 4 stars. And if you want a quick and easy read, I highly recommend them. And then I went to look at her previous work, which was Kick and Push, and that one I had to completely drop. I tend not to leave the books unfinished if I can, unless they're horrendous. Well, Kick and Push for me was horrendous. I stopped after about 120 pages. Completely binned it, and I gave it 1 star. I really don't like it. So you can see her writing style has improved. So yeah, 7 books by her. At the same time, I tend to read in parallel. I had finished The Happy Reader, issue number 1. This is not my first magazine. That's my 3rd one I've read. They're published by the Penguin. You can see the little penguin there. And they used to be quarterly, so they will come autumn, winter, spring and summer. And I have now subscribed to them, and I got an email about a month and a half ago saying that they decided to go from quarterly to biannual. Which is a bit of a shame, because I really do like this. This I have read, and I have given this 4 stars. The format of this magazine is really small, as you can see. It's divided in 2 main sections. The first half being the interview, and it's a pretty prolonged interview, so it's literally 50% of that book. And for this issue, the person they had interviewed was Dan Stevens. If you are a fan of Downton Abbey, you would know who he is. He's a British actor. He's quite well known here, and he's trying to make a name for himself now in full movies in the United States. And the reason why he was invited as a celebrity to be in this is the first ever edition of the Reader, issue number 1, is because he was one of the judges on the panel of the Booker Prize. And this is issue number 1. I can't remember when it came out. I think it was 2014. Yeah, winter 2014. So he talked about his experience. What did he read when he was doing each season of Downton Abbey? How did he approach reading for the Booker Prize? How he divided his time? What were the common themes? Did he manage to read all 900 plus books in a given time or not? The interview is really well conducted. It's split into 2 sections because the person interviewing him done it in multiple entries. So they had 2 sessions which are well described here, with a break in between, so it gives you a better dialogue. You revisit some topics more than once. And then the second half of the book focuses on a topic, and it seems to be a theme for all of the issue magazines. So they choose a book, and they're going to use that book as an inspiration. So they're going to contract different journalists, different book critics, or different writers, and they're all going to take an element from the book which had inspired them the most or had an influence in their life, and they're going to expand on the topic. And this one, the book they have chosen, the very first issue, was The Woman in White. So they talk about the woman bug. This is the Penguin Classics edition they use as a cover. So they obviously talk you through the book, the characters, and then they have different essays. So for example, the effect it had on the EastEnders, the classic British TV drama, the effect it had on the whole Gothic style, on photography, so how it has influenced the way designers approach the style, how we have a lot of cultural use, and how you can walk through the book in London. So they recommend the walk you can do and the places you can see, what are there now compared to what it was when the book was written. It is really well done. I can highly recommend that you are to look into this copy. I'm not obviously the first person to talk about the Happy Reader. I got my idea for picking it up from Alice on the Book Castle, and I'm going to try to put the link for her channel. She's a lovely booktuber, and I've been watching her for a while. She's from Norway in Oslo, and she does read quite a lot of classics. Her English is excellent, and she mentioned this particular magazine, and I got really inspired. So I picked up a copy and got hooked. This one I gave 4 stars on the Goodreader. Another magazine, since we are talking about magazines I have read in November, was Slightly Foxed, issue number 51, which is autumn 2016. This was my first issue of Slightly Foxed magazine. I know people have been raving it for years. I have seen a lot of references to this on the Instagram, on the booktube section of the Instagram, from a lot of people I've been following for a while. They are raving about this. I picked up a copy in November. I thought, like, fine, it's still autumn, I picked this up. I have read this thing really quickly, and I since then have subscribed to the Slightly Fox, and I'm obsessively trying to buy all of the previous issues because this is absolutely amazing. I have given this 4 stars, not 5, because not every single essay within this was equally well written, or not equally well written, they're all really well written. It's just not every book they cover had appealed to me. What this magazine effectively does, it's printed in London, it does not focus on new books. Instead, every single book mentioned in here has been published later. It might be out of print. Some of the books mentioned in this issue in particular really piqued my interest, and I have been looking at buying them on eBay or at some antiquarian shops here in Cambridge, because you just cannot buy them anymore. So on Amazon, they're out of print. And one thing I picked up this year for myself personally is that I quite like 20th century, early 20th century literature. I like the setting sort of in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. So get that language, which is undoubtedly different from the language we use nowadays. It's quite pleasant, and I like to see books which are really well written books, and people fall out of love with them, mentioned again and celebrated, and this is exactly what it does. The structure of this book is, I'm going to show you, you have a series of essays, about 2 pages per essay, sometimes more, sometimes less. This is the other half. And in each essay, they're gonna ask an author, sometimes celebrity, sometimes a journalist, sometimes a person of an interesting profession. So you had a curator, Kew Gardens in one of them once, to pick up the book they really like, which is quite forgotten, and talk about this book. Or maybe they do the entire celebration of the author which used to be quite popular, say, in the 1960s in London, in UK, but since then had fallen out of the favor of the readers and has been forgotten. And that's exactly what it does. I cannot recommend the Slightly Foxed quarterly editions to you enough. They come out 4 times a year. This is not the recent one. I am about to start the recent one. I've been basically keeping myself away from the book. I had to hide issue number 52. so I don't read it until my Christmas holidays, because I really would like to read it over Christmas holidays, where I can do it leisurely, when I can because I tend to just go and bulk read all of the essays, and I would like to stop myself, so I read two, think about them, do a bit of research online, and come back to it. Really, really, really good book. What else did I read? I also have, as I've promised to myself, read more in Russian. So I've picked up a book which has not been, I believe, translated into English. And it's sort of a magical realism book by a very well-known Russian duo. It's the two brothers, братья Стругацкие. And the book I read is called «Отягощенный злом» или «40 лет спустя». And it is a strange book recommended to me by my friend, because I've read early in the year a series of books by the French author which has not been translated into English as well, so I'm not going to mention it. But he highly recommended it. I think Brothers Strugatskis, they should be known in English. They are slowly being rediscovered because they've written a lot in the 70s and in the 80s. And there is a bit of an interest from the English publishers to translate them into English, but I have not seen the translation for this book. But for those of you who have read Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, you would like that book. I have read Master and Margarita fully once, and I have tried to read it 5 times, but it just did not agree with me. That's one of my aims for next year, is to actually read it again, like sit down and force myself to read it. I'm not the biggest fan of religion being used in a book, and it's taken me a while to read that particular one. I have started it in January and I have just finished it in November. So it was a break of about 5 months when I didn't even go anywhere near it. But now that I've read it, I actually do like it. I give it 4 stars. It does require quite a lot of your attention. It's not a book you should read when you read it tired. You have to think about it and sometimes go over it again. But I do hope that one day it does get translated into English, because in the English-speaking readers' universe, particularly English-speaking booktube, there will be quite a lot of interest for that book. There will be a lot of love. I also finally got around to reading Nabokov's Luzhin's Defense. I've read it in Russian because that's the book he has originally written in Russian, and I really, really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Highly recommend you read it, particularly if you do like chess. I'm not really good at playing chess. I was the worst one in my family. But you don't really need to be an expert. You just need to know that chess exists, and some people take it extremely seriously, to the point that it can completely change their life and consume every single thought they have. I really recommend Solutions Defense by Nabokov. I basically read that book in a day. I could not put it down. It was all consuming. What else did I read? I have read another Russian author, Narine Abgaryan. It's a new book which came out this year called Zulali. Narine Abgaryan, she's Russian, but she's from Armenia. So in Soviet Union, it was obviously one country. And she does live in Russia, and she does write in Russian. But she has a huge Armenian heritage in her writing. So obviously she spent her childhood there. I think she still speaks the language, if not really well. The Armenian language, I mean. And when you read her books, like, you can smell her childhood, you can taste her childhood. Her description of food and experiences and people she came across is simply amazing. So again, she has not been translated into English. This is not her first book. That's the 3rd book I have read this year by her. No, that's the 4th book I have read by her this year, and I loved every single one of them. It's such a shame that she has not been translated into English, but then again, you will need more than one translator to work together, because I think unless you have lived in the Soviet Union and a small town in the periphery, and you have experienced that overlay of different cultures and the communist regime on top of it, it's very difficult to actually explain it to someone who has never experienced it. It's a very different life. So Narine Abgaryan Zulali, I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved that book. I have read it in electronic version. I'm absolutely keen on purchasing the paper. I'm going to collect all of her works in paper because they're just so funny. There are parts in that book I was laughing so hard people on the bus thought there was something wrong with me. Like, I literally could not stop myself. And there was the last essay which gave the title. So it's a collection of short stories, and that particular short story gave the main title to the book. I have absolutely been brought down to my tears, because the topic she's raising of rape and mental illness in that book, and the way society treats it, or society used to treat it at that time, is just absolutely well done. So I gave it 5 stars. The last Russian book I have read, I have actually listened to it on an audiobook. That's by Sergei Dovlatov, Compromise in English. Sergei Dovlatov is a Russian journalist slash writer who had immigrated to America. And he had died pretty young. I think he was in his 50s from cirrhosis. So his lifestyle clearly contributed to his early demise. He is quite a drinker, and that drinking is really well documented in all of his writing. In Russia, he is quite a read author. People really rave about him. Everyone knows who Sergei Dovlatov is. In terms of modern Russian literature, he's really well established. And I have never read anything by him. I have all of his books, minus this one, in paper, and my husband has been going through them this last 2 months, just reading all of them. And the reason why I wanted to start with this one is because on the Russian Audible, so it's like an Audible version, but in Russian, which I really like, they have asked celebrities, male celebrities from like really known Russian actors, to read his books. And Compromise, the one I've read, was read by Konstantin Khabensky, which is a Russian actor you might have seen because he played in that movie which has been translated into English, but doesn't matter. He's really, really, really good at doing audiobooks. So I wanted to read by him, and I picked it up. It's taken me the entire month, guys. It's a short, it's like 300, no, it's about 300 pages book. It's a short book, but it's an audio. Oh my god. It's a collection of short stories all on the same topic of the life he had led when he lived in Estonia, the author. So it's written from the first place. It's just partially autobiographical, I guess. The drinking is just so preeminent in that book. I found it very unpalatable. I found it difficult to read. And I gave it 2 stars, which I'm sure my mama, for example, will debate, because she really likes his work and she thinks he's funny. I did not find him hilarious. I find him irritating in most places, so I gave him 2 stars. Which brings me to the last book I have read in November, and that is this beautiful, look at that, Persephone edition. And this is called The Victorian Chaise Longue by Margarita Lasky. And this is the book itself. So it has 2 covers, and it has in every book a bookmark given to you, which links to the end papers. So all of the Persephone books are silver, and all of them have a really beautiful end paper, and it will get a bookmark which is matching, which has the description of what the book is about and where you can buy it. This book is quite special because its end papers are different, and the difference because the time period discussed in this book is not the same. There is a bit of time travel. It's a bit of magical realism in this book. It's a little bit of horror. I guess you can describe it as horror. It was, for me, it was unsettling for me, because I do find everything to do with mental disease quite frightening. Like, if you have cancer, you know what to do with it. If you have dementia, there's nothing you can do. You have to live. Like, it affects who you are, your being, your brain. I don't know if I'm putting that correctly. But basically the premise of this book is that there is a girl who lives in London. She's married, she has a child, and she's suffering from tuberculosis or consumption. And she's slowly dying. Whether or not she wants to admit it to herself is a different story, but she's not going to recover. And when she was feeling better, before she had her child, she purchased this Victorian chaise longue. She's really old. No one in her family really knows why she purchased it, but she felt an affinity for the object. And then It was left in her living room because she got unwell, she got pregnant, and then she had a baby boy. During her recovery, they decided that she can now leave her bedroom and go to the living room. And there is this chaise longue, so they choose that particular piece of furniture to be her resting place because it's much more comfortable than a sofa they have, a normal chair. And then she goes to that chaise longue, she falls asleep on it, and when she wakes up, she's in a Victorian London with all of the unpleasantries which come with it. And I'm not going to tell you anything more about this book. It's really short. It's going to take you an evening to read. It's only 99 pages. It's going to take you about an evening. It has taken me a week though, because I had to take a break. I found the in mid-stage quite frightening, but that's just me. I don't do horror, as I've mentioned, in Gothic stories. But the language is really interesting. Margarita Lasky, she used to work on Radio 4 in the 1960s. So the language she has chosen is really, really fitting to the time period. She's completely switching between 20th century and 19th century. And you can read it in the way she constructs her sentences and the words she chooses to describe the same thing. So even for that reason, if you like linguistical aspect of the writing, I highly recommend it. Not to mention the fact that this is a Persephone book and they're just stunning. So that's it for my November books. There were 14 in total. And thank you for watching, guys. Bye.